for coming tonight.
Call this meeting to order. Effingham County Planning Board Workshop, December 12th, 2023. Welcome everyone. We'll open this meeting with a word of prayer and we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance. Ask that everyone please stand that can. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we just praise you for this time. We can come discuss these changes to our ordinances and it's very important information, Lord. Just ask you would look on us and just guide our discussions. Give us all safe travel. Be with us through our upcoming meeting tonight. And always bless our country and our leaders, our troops and first responders. In Jesus' name. In Jesus' name. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Our agenda, is it correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Can I get a motion to approve this agenda?
Motion to approve.
Motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Zipper. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? About minutes from November 14th. Any discussion? Call for a motion to approve these minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Mr. Zipper, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Higgins. All those in favor? Any opposed? All items presented tonight will be presented again at a future Board of Commissioners meeting as a public hearing. Item number 1 is consideration of an amendment to the Code of Ordinances, Part 2, Official Code, Appendix C, Article 3, Section 3.5, Tree Preservation.
Yes, sir. So actually we've changed the name from tree preservation to community tree management. And so this ordinance that you have in front of you, this is a very rough draft. This was my baby. So for this, I started off as a framework. I pulled this a good bit from the Athens Clark County their tree community management ordinance. We really want to cultivate that rural, the nature of Effingham County and preserve that, protecting our tree canopy across our county. You know, you guys know better than most that our community gets up. They want to protect, you know, the big trees, keeping those on the properties that's being developed, along with protecting our tree canopy. So for this first draft, I'm really hoping to get feedback, incentivizing our developers. I think that's a big one, especially when it comes to protecting different types of trees that we're seeing on properties, and then that tree canopy overall. This ordinance can be as detailed to percentages within each zoning for tree canopy. It can also range to as broad as we want it. So I'm looking for that feedback for that as well. You know, how detailed maybe we want to see it, as opposed to, you know, if we want it to be more broad. And then just a discussion overall. So, you know, again, addressing the concerns of our community. So.
I just would like to ask one general question, because as I was reading it, I mean, you answered my question. I was wondering where this document came from. If you put it together or our staff put it together. So you answered that. When the county hired the engineering group that came in and rewrote a lot of this, or supposedly, is that what we're going through now? I mean, did they not do this? Did they do some of it? What did they do?
So Inspire or Symbiosity is the group that you're talking about.
That's
Their
the
contract, huh?
SNME who presented to us, right?
Yeah, they are responsible for the comprehensive plan rewrite that has to be done every 5 years, and they're responsible for the zoning ordinance rewrite. So on top of that, you had conversations at the retreat of the commissioners about farm, keeping that rural look, trees, keeping the rural look, commercial corridors, which are about 5, you saw where there's like 5 roads are identified. And subdivision, rewriting subdivision, and then, sketch plan. Oh, and rural business, rural resident, that stuff that we can't ever get a handle on. Those are the things that are left to be done that they are not doing. They're only doing the zoning ordinance, subdivision, and the comprehensive plan. Everything else is the commissioner giving it to us and telling us to find the language that they want.
So when we went to those meetings down at the old, remember? And there were some meetings, Denise Grabowski was down there?
Yes,
Meetings, community meetings.
that's the comprehensive plan meeting.
That was the comprehensive plan meeting. See, I was under the impression that that was this stuff.
That is the symbolic relationship to the zoning and ordinances, yes. So when they say they want to preserve the rural character of the county, how do you do that? Well, you look at maybe, frontage, farmland preservation, you look at not taking down, all your trees like the buffer ordinance says. And so there is an indirect relationship, but they're not the ones putting it together right now.
So they are on, their scope was only comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance,
Yes, sir.
subdivision ordinance, tree ordinance.
And
doesn't fall
no,
inside those
subdivision was
ordinances.
theirs too.
We don't have a UDO, we don't have a unified development ordinance, so there's a bunch of pieces, and it sounds to me like
Thank
their
you.
scope was focused on just those two.
Yes.
The comp
Makes sense.
plan and.
Zoning, which is uses, setbacks.
Yeah. But see, now,
Buffers.
as Ryan points out, a unified development ordinance would be awesome. I've written 2 of them. But you've got stormwater is a separate,
Right, on
You've
separate
got-
ordinance.
there's 79 other ordinances that are out there, and probably half of them are land use related that are not in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a shortcoming for sure.
I mean, I was just curious. I mean, as reading through this.
Yeah, where does it fall in?
Right, and no offense, but as somebody who doesn't live here, who doesn't work here writing it, is that what we're reading, or is it someone that's part of our staff that's getting direction from?
Yeah, and we try to pilfer as much as possible.
Well, on that,
Yes,
as much as I love Athens, Clark County,
it's not the same.
that is an extremely strong, difficult place to get projects. I mean, it's.
Oh, is it really?
And granted,
It is.
I understand we want to improve, but we better be really cautious with what we throw out there, or like it'll flip
Nope.
the development community on its head. And
Absolutely.
I'm a landscape architect, love tree. I think we need a tree ordinance, but I did have a bunch of questions in this. This is
Absolutely.
wonderful that we got this out there for discussion, but I do think we should come back with at some point, see like what does, if it was approved this way, name the person. I'm a forester in the community.
Yeah.
I'm a developer in the community.
Yeah.
I want to come do this. There should be an example of what that means that we can all clearly understand, in my opinion, so we all know what we're voting on approving. Because there's a lot of, I'm gonna be honest, I'm dealing with it right now in the county that's directly adjacent to us, because staff changed. The entire understanding of the ordinance is being interpreted a little differently, right? And a good example gives everybody a clearer expectation of being able to point to something. So I was curious where
No,
that came from.
absolutely. I did, and again, the Athens Clark County, I think, was a good, I pulled a lot from them. There was a lot I left because theirs is very
Not gonna happen here.
detailed and just not in our scope. But, again, this just being discussion, it is not on our agenda to be voted on, because I did want that feedback. I do want, your feedback on, you know, how we make this the best it can be for our county.
So did this come about because we having a problem with tree canopy, or we're just trying to grow that part of the government?
So you made a good point earlier, is that it seems like there has been, somebody will come in and timber a piece of property all the way up to the property lines. And then somebody will want to come in and do a subdivision later, and all of a sudden they got to spend, you know, $20,000 putting the same plants back they could have left originally. And so, that original tree canopy is just way more beneficial as far as a buffer and other things than it is to put things back. And so we've modified the LDA now, the land disturbing, and we're going to go ahead and go out there and measure the buffers first, and just, you know, put a piece of tape saying, hey, try to stay on this side of them, so that we do keep more of that original. And I think that's the look that everybody wants. It's just difficult to get sometimes. So if we're more proactive and get out there ahead of time, I think that we can preserve that rural character a lot easier than putting them back in the ground.
Yeah,
So,
As long as we don't hold
a-
anybody up. But
a thought I guess I always try to look at it to be, there's a difference between a forest and a forest, right?
sure.
If those trees are planted in rows, they were planted and they were intended to be harvested at some point, just like soybeans in a field. So I do feel like there's a dramatically different standard there from my standpoint of, even if it's for development or timber harvesting, right? If it's a pristine maritime forest or hardwood forest, different story likely. But I guess, again, I've gone through it once. I think a ordinance like this, I would need to go through multiple times and sit down with staff as well to ask questions. But I do think some sort of an example that we could all see that this is what this would mean, right? If it was enacted this way, because the way I read it, there were multiple things it was trying to cover, right? It
Yes.
was the forestry management approach. There's a development approach and different standards for such of what has to happen. I mean, the first question is, what's the survey required to even get started, right? To know what you've got, and then break it down from that point. So I guess I'll ask a follow-up question. Did I miss it, or did we just, this is what came out Friday, right? We have not had this beyond,
No, that's just what's Friday.
okay. It's very difficult to give constructive feedback on a Tuesday. We won't get it until Friday. So just that is hard, right? To give a lot of detailed feedback on that. So, I think it's great. But getting into the weeds on it, I don't think I could give anything beyond just that we need to be very sensitive to creating an ordinance that works for Effingham as opposed to anywhere else.
Which is why it's not on the agenda, but just for your purview.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. As long as that, at first when I saw it, I thought, oh my goodness, we got a lot to debate and discuss this evening, so.
When a developer puts a plan in, or a sketch plan in, or a master plan, certain portion of that has to have green space, right?
So if it's a PUD, they have to have green space, that's correct.
And in the green space, are they just having shrubs, or are they having trees?
It could be a combination of both, plus just open turf where they can do a dog park or.
So are we trying to decide on what is the tree of choice? This certain genus species of tree grows the quickest and gives us the biggest canopy in the least amount of time?
No, I think we're more interested in isolating major developments behind some type of tree canopy so that it's less distinguishable, and that the differentiation of uses is a smoother transition if you keep the tree canopy than if you don't. So if I'm driving down the road and I see, tree, a little bit of an apartment, tree, then a single family subdivision, that's more appealing. That's what we're accustomed to than if I see apartment, single family apartment, and I don't see any tree canopy in there at all. So since Effingham is young in the development stage, this is your opportunity to preserve some of that tree canopy before you don't have any left.
And I
Now,
think, oh, sorry.
But
go
it
ahead,
needs
Steve.
to be incentive-based. It doesn't need to be stick.
Yeah, I feel,
But so that's, tree canopy's gonna be in the setback or in the buffer?
I think a lot of it is already in the buffer, and I think she's distinguishing maybe a few other areas that we're looking at.
Yep, and I think on the other hand too, we can, with this ordinance, we can work to, like when we see developments that come in that have these, what we can call legendary trees or even historic trees. I think a good example of that was over there by the Grace Community Church. A lot of the constituents came up and spoke about keeping those trees, protecting those trees. This ordinance, we can work towards being able to protect those types of trees as well. So on top of the tree canopy within the buffer too.
Yeah, a lot of the trees you're going to keep are probably going to be 200-year-old live oaks. That's probably pretty standard if that's something that we want to do. Now, if it's in the middle of the way, it's got to go.
Somewhere I read in there that talked about pine trees, but we only got about 675 million of them in Effingham.
Yeah, but none of them are special, right?
Well, not to me.
I know.
So,
Yeah, I
would say,
But there's sort of a danger.
well,
I mean, you could snap off and spike a house. I mean, you wouldn't want a 90-foot tree right next to your house, a pine tree.
I wouldn't want one 100 years old, because probably the heart's rotting in it.
So, how do you want this, how do you wish for this to go? I mean, you're looking for an open discussion like we're having?
Yes, sir.
Is that fair? Okay.
Yes, sir. So again, just a very basic rough draft for you guys. Open discussion. I will bring, I want to take your ideas and your what you see out day to day, what you hear from the constituents, what you know, and be able to form that into a much better ordinance for you.
Now, Ryan, is there somewhere that works well that you've worked with?
I mean, yeah, there's pieces. I mean, granted, I work in the coastal plain mostly, and not the Piedmont. So I just know, watching development in Athens, Clarke County, it's got some strong ordinances, which all four of us have strong ordinances. Don't get me wrong on that. Yeah, I mean, most of the ordinances start with like an intent statement that, in order to maintain or create, there's a desire to have 40% canopy coverage or 50% canopy coverage, whatever. And then there's an ordinance, like you're working toward how are we achieving that through a certain diversity of tree species, sizes, like what types of trees we're doing. And I haven't had a chance to dig through it, but I just saw some really big tree numbers per acre that I don't really understand how they apply in different scenarios. So, I mean, maybe you could help me. Like, if I was development community coming in to do, I'm not even going to say subdivision, if I were coming in to do a convenience store, what part of this ordinance would apply to that, and where would that start? Just so we can kind of walk through that.
Absolutely. Let me pull that for you.
You're not using your new fancy piece of equipment there?
217.
I printed them all out ahead of time.
Thank you.
The password 0272.
He printed them since the county can't afford to print them.
Thank you, Ryan, for doing that.
So I think initially looking at the
I knew I was
technical
getting about
standards and understanding, what it means for, the tree conservation and that you may have on your parcel, that falls under this ordinance, that would probably for me be where, the start would be for development coming in, and then moving from there. And again, the acreage obviously can be amended if it is too much. Just being able to, your site preparation standards, making sure, your soil is what it needs to be, for the specific trees that are out there. To me, that's kind of the
Can I
start.
make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Why don't we just go through it real quick? Start like we do every meeting. I mean, so it starts off with the definitions, which, I mean, personally, I didn't have any problems with the way the definitions, I mean, it was very extensive, but, I understand that in today's world, I mean, we have to be very specific. There were actually some of them I didn't completely understand, but
Yep, sure.
did you?
Well, I mean, again, without, is there mitigation required in the ordinance? I hadn't seen that anywhere. If so, it would need a definition. Is there protected tree? What is the size of a protected tree? I hadn't had a chance to dig through it and see all those things,
So,
maybe it's in there, I just hadn't had a
we
chance
would,
to see it.
we would definitely have to go back and add those, because there is mitigation that would be. And I think that's just a good thing to put in anyway, especially because, we live in an area that has the wetlands and the flood zone, so those are good, definitions to just have, especially in an ordinance like this anyway, so.
I thought the definitions were very, like I said, very extensive, but it's fine. So the first big mark is landmark trees.
Yes.
So, I mean, I heard Steve say we want to protect them, but if it's in the way, it's got to go.
Gotta go.
So,
So to me, this, when I thought of this, my first, example was maybe the Parkers down there that,
that's the first thing that came to my mind.
so they had what I would consider a landmark tree on their part, but
Several.
Yeah,
but
three.
they,
Yeah.
for some reason had to take them down. I believe that was for septic issues.
Yeah, they showed them to us on the original plan, and they were going to protect them.
They were, and I'm pretty sure that they had mentioned that in the meeting. And I think that due to septic issues, and I don't want to speak for that site, but I think there was a reason that they had to take them down. So that was,
That's a very good reason.
Not, because their septic is to the left of the property, not in the front, but anyway.
okay. So there wasn't a good reason that they had to take them down. But that is, example-wise, that is what I think of as a landmark tree.
So in my opinion, there should be a strong penalty to take that tree out, but if it has to come out, it could come out, right? Because, I mean, if it's sitting dead and square in the middle of a piece of property, either that or somebody needs to buy it and make a green space, right? Right. Yeah, or you could move it.
What's the penalty? What's the penalty?
Or
What is
replace
the
it.
penalty? I mean, it's typically a mitigation, right? You either had to plant X amount of trees somewhere else, you pay the county for trees to go be planted in parks elsewhere. There's a lot of opportunity, I mean, a lot of places have mitigation requirements. That's why I was asking whether there was a
Gotcha.
mitigation in this, or recompense, some
The,
places
the,
call it
the problem
recompense.
is, I mean, it's a 200-300-year-old live oak. I mean, I specifically remember, and a lot of times, some ways I regret it, some ways I don't. Mr. Steve Collins wanted to put a gas station in the corner of Little McCall and 119.
Yeah.
There's a massive live oak there. And we said, yes, but you gotta work around the live oak. And he couldn't make it work. Then Parker's comes in and they show us the live oaks that they're protecting, and then they don't. So I'm like, well, I guess I owe Steve Collins an apology. You
Yeah,
know?
because he tried and
Couldn't make it work.
didn't make, that's,
So
That's right. There
that-
needs to be a difference,
And
yeah.
I don't know the answer. Those are just the two scenarios that come to my mind
Yeah.
when we start talking about leaving. Yes, I would love to see all live oaks left.
I don't think that's what, I mean, I
But
personally-
sometimes
It's
they
not.
can't be.
They can't.
Sometimes they
so, I mean,
But drawing.
I
the
think a
line
strong
between-
ordinance that requires plant back of trees is a very good thing too, and allow certain trees to come out. There's a lot of tree canopied areas that everybody thinks, wow, this is amazing, they preserved all this, and no, it's just had time to grow back, and we had or had a vision to plant trees. all of downtown Savannah. Very few of those, I mean, granted, it's been 200 years, but those aren't 200 years old trees. I mean, they've grown and grown, I mean, from Victory Drive on, that's since the 1940s, right? So, I mean, that's, granted, it's 90 years, but still, it's hugely impactful to everything that's happened there, and that's because trees were planted. So I love the fact that we're talking about a tree ordinance, but I do think that there's got to be some mechanism for working with somebody around very large trees. I would say preserving 18-inch, 24-inch live oaks that are young and healthy, that are going to grow pretty, I mean, they actually, I know they're long-lived, but they grow and get bigger and bigger. I got one in my own yard that's going from 8 inches to 24 inches in the last, 15 years. So they will be substantial and very important trees too in the future. So, and I would, whatever we do, I think it needs to have an arborist recommendation inside of it, because the last thing we want to do is tell somebody to keep a tree that's unhealthy and it falls. We don't need that responsibility to tell somebody it's a healthy tree that needs to be preserved. So I know we didn't get very far into that, but.
Well, how do we stop the Parker thing from happening again is the question, in my mind. I mean, they said they weren't gonna do it, and then they came and said, oh, well, it's in the septic field. Oh, and then,
Well, if we had an ordinance, they would have to come before somebody, and then, it would be a penalty of some kind if they had to
right.
move it, like plant, I don't know, I got no idea, 25, 30 trees?
I mean, it varies. Some places will say if it's a 36-inch tree, you plant 36, or you plant 48 inches of trees back. That can be 2-inch, 8-inch, whatever you want to do. That way you get a big canopy back, but you're replacing the caliper size, or the diameter breast height
Right.
for caliper size that you're doing.
That's
That's what a
interesting.
lot of places, help me, that's how much but they put enough penalty on taking those big ones out. They don't tell you absolutely cannot, because they knew they were going to get sued by people, because you can't develop some pieces of property, right? So there's a mechanism in there that encourages preservation enough that people do work around them
I think
most
we
of the time.
need to adopt that idea.
So where they
Some of them must be pretty strong, because they move some of those trees over.
Yeah.
I mean, huge
Again,
trees,
so,
they
yeah,
move.
because, well, there are some instances, like, I think there are probably probably a variance that has to be approved by the planning commission, right? And so it's a public, invite the crowd to come debate this tree removal, right? But there is a mechanism for below that allows for plant back. And if there's a hugely wooded site that doesn't need it, then you still have to mitigate it. And what can be is, like Savannah, if you've got a site, say downtown, right, where they don't want you to create a bunch of open space, they're all about finishing the grid or building dense. Well, you don't get to just say, I'm not putting the trees in. You pay to a tree fund that helps fund future tree plantings throughout the community. So, I mean, I think a mitigation stance on it would be a very beneficial thing to the county, with the exception of certain things like buffers and things of that we are very particular about wanting to create. That's probably a no, you don't touch anything that's greater than 12 inches or whatever the case may be. For hardwoods.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Now, I personally think pine trees are good too, but that's just me. Especially adjacent to a big tall building. Can bring the scale down. It takes a long time to get that kind of height back again.
We can grow pine tree fast now.
Well, I just use this example with somebody else, and next time, y'all, I hate to use poor for an example on something, but I'm going to, because it actually is a great case study of it. There's nothing, I'm not saying anything negative about Poor, don't get there on that. But look at the older Publix in Poor. I don't know, have y'all ever noticed that there's nothing but 50 feet of the old pine trees preserved in front of it? They took all the understory out, so you still have perfect visibility into the site. But there's this canopy of pine trees that are there. Everything else along it, that same standard wasn't held. And I mean, it's just night and day the difference to the aesthetic. Speaking of corridors, the night and day the difference to the aesthetic of that
It's
corridor.
on Highway
has.
80?
No, this is on Poor Parkway. Like, look at, like,
Oh, yeah.
the Publix there.
Yeah.
You can see, I mean,
Right.
if next time you drive it, pay attention
Yeah,
to it. It
that's
makes,
true.
just imagine that corridor if that standard would have been applied to both sides of it. And not saying we're blocking visibility. Commercial businesses need visibility, but that canopy and it was just pines. It wasn't some great tree. Now granted, a storm could come through and knock them down, but I mean, a storm could come through and knock live oak limbs down too. That's what happens. That's what
Where
happens
is
in
that
downtown.
Publix? Over there by Savannah Quarters or
No, it's the other one. It's the older one.
other side?
Close to
Closer
the
to the
Tanger.
airport. Yeah, closer to Tanger, probably places you might
Yeah,
avoid.
McAllister.
I'll have to check that out.
It really is a good.
That's true. That was
to
one of
look
the
at-
first things that was done out there.
That, the first thing was the apartment complex there on the corner where they really applied the standard where you were not supposed to touch the buffer at all.
Right.
You can't even see the apartments.
That's true.
And then everything kind
Had
of.
had that been applied all the way down the road.
Well, that would, to me, that's Bluffton, and
Yep.
that's not fair to commercial
I
businesses,
agree.
right?
That's Hilton Head. Yep.
That's Hilton Head, and
Yep.
it's very difficult to see the businesses, right? And I think somewhere in a happy medium, like, to me, that standard applied to residential, wonderful. I don't have to see people's backyards,
Yep.
right?
Right.
That's complete
Block it,
buffer to
yeah.
residential, I think is a great idea. Commercial, we should be a little considerate of visibility to the stores, because they do, I mean, they struggle enough as it is, so we need to make sure people can see them.
So that's some great feedback, Chelsea. so
Yeah,
far.
absolutely. I appreciate it.
So do you think that tree management does help the character of the county maintain its rural look?
Absolutely.
I do.
No doubt,
Yeah,
no
Okay.
doubt.
but I got a question, and maybe Ryan would be better to answer this. If you look at the houses that was just built, on Blue Jay at Blanford, right across from Namaco Station.
Yeah.
Where the new intersection
Oh,
is.
So,
yeah.
so their backyards backs up to the road.
Yeah.
And, I mean, literally, their backyard's not as big as from me to Chelsea. So how would you manage that in a situation like that?
Well, help me remember, what was that site before?
It
Was
was
it
a
a field?
field.
It was a
So
farm.
that's where we're gonna have some challenges, right? Because we've got a lot of agricultural land that's not gonna have any trees to start with. I think a little bit stronger plant back buffer, because I think right now it was what, the old standards.
We did change it in the buffer.
Right, I
ordinance,
know,
yep.
but it's still only 15, or every 15
It went
feet
from
or so. It was
30 feet to 15,
So that's the.
and then we
stand-
added understory requirements to
So
it.
right now, when that project was approved, it was a hardwood tree every 30 feet, right? So
Would you have to set the houses further back off the road, or would you put it in their backyard?
I think a more densely planted buffer could achieve.
Yeah.
Granted, day one, it's not going to, but again, if it's allowed to grow in, over time, it could improve it. But we definitely do in the ordinances need to consider a condition of farmland that's wide open, because majority of what I've seen, with the exception of a few, have been that, right? I mean, we don't have as much planted
Pers-
pine development as we might in other
Personally, I'd like to
places.
see options.
Yeah.
That development should have been moved further away from that road, in my opinion.
Well, I just wondered how, if you had that ordinance, how could you meet it? I mean, without moving, and
To
then
To
when
me,
you
that
move it,
it needed a roadside buffer.
Yeah,
but then when you move it, you're gonna cut the developer's amount of homes down.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just throwing that out because.
That's a
I think
major,
establish-
that's a major thoroughfare.
You're gonna
I think
hear that.
but I think establish a standard that's the standard and apply it regularly, and our standard, again, in my opinion, should be the thing we want to buffer the most is the backyards of residential
So
neighborhoods.
this is what I see happening
That's
there, is you got a gas station on one side of the road and homes on the other side, and that is a major, that's Blue Jay Road.
Yeah.
The gas station doesn't bother me like the backyards.
We
of the
shouldn't
homes
have, we should have left, we should have allowed ourselves some more room for future expansion of that roadway. Is my problem.
Right.
Well,
do. That's no doubt that a good wide buffer is also easy future acquisition
That's correct.
area
Yes.
for a future, as opposed to taking somebody's
Yeah, because
yard.
that's gonna be a big thoroughfare when the parkway lands down the
So
road.
wouldn't you have to go back and say that your buffers in these certain areas, 15 feet's not adequate, or 20
Roadside,
feet's not
roadside.
roadside?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we did, in the buffer ordinance, we did change some of that about road size, and we did change the part about it backs up to it, you've gotta have a different set of standards. So we did do that in this new buffer that we just passed, everybody passed. And then we did increase the standards in between subdivisions. It used to be 15 feet, I think now it's 30. And that is, Longleaf Village and, Autumn Woods was a good example of that.
We saw I gave some feedback, but it went on to the commissioners.
Yeah.
Because that's the one I gave that a lot of market
The buffer.
feedback on, yeah.
Where is Autumn Woods on
They were
Goshen?
determined
Yes,
to do
sir.
that one fast.
Yeah, I think there was, look, get something in place is better than waiting to have nothing, but just be willing to amend it again.
Yeah, because if we.
Oh, always. It's a living, breathing
That's what we
document.
gotta recognize is
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't care, we changed this.
But
6
that
months
was
ago,
an
we need to change it.
example that everybody used as to why we've got to change the buffer ordinance to begin with.
Yeah.
That was really a deciding factor.
There's two subdivisions that come to mind whenever we're talking about this tree ordinance. The most recent one is Rain Dance, down there across from Ebenezer Elementary and Middle School. That was a forest. That was a big, beautiful, old natural forest.
And that was a reason why we're changing the LDA to be more conservative with pre-construction. Creekside up
Yes,
to
they
Park
cut it off.
West too.
And then Mr. Jack and Theron down there by you, they cut all that, and they shouldn't have.
Yeah, they clear cut.
And you don't need, but, I mean, sometimes 10 or 15 feet by the road's enough.
Yeah.
20 feet.
Well, I mean, so I don't, does this talk about like, if you harvest for timber harvesting like, you haven't submitted a development plan?
Yeah, there's two, that's right. That's two
Like,
scenarios.
Two different scenarios typically. One is if you do that, typically if you harvest for timber, there's usually like a 2-year period you don't get to submit for site development plans, right? If you did it
I
for
think it's
timber-
12 months, yeah.
Okay, 12 months, so it is something in there, I mean, 12 months isn't very long.
But it's not gonna grow
Versus-
back in 12 months.
Versus if you're coming through with a site development plan there's more teeth to what has to be protected, then it's a different timbering
But
process.
if I cut my timber and then you come along and wanna buy my land,
There are a lot of places that have ordinances
They-
in place that say, it's a way to preclude somebody from
Yeah.
mass clearing it right before they go to sell it for
That's
development.
right.
I mean, that is why it's there.
Whoops.
Well, that's all, folks.
That's-
So our timber ordinance does,
does
our
instead.
current timber ordinance does address that, and then, the tree ordinance does also address it as well, so.
I mean, what if I have no plans of selling it? What if I'm just harvesting my trees, and then after, Alan wants to come along and buy my land and develop it.
But it's not usually saying you can't, it's just there's a time period.
Yeah.
Well, what good does 12 months do? You're not gonna grow anything back in 12 months.
It doesn't, I agree with you, you're not gonna grow a thing back.
No, but this is when you've got an ordinance in place that's more, again, mitigation based, that you're trying to, you were talking about how would you prevent this from happening in that neighborhood without some sort of a time period requirement like that? There's
Everybody do it.
nothing, because if I had a forested area, I'd just say, okay, well, I'm harvesting the timber, and 3 months later, I'm selling it to a development group, and I don't have to deal with any tree mitigation.
I think that's a very different scenario than what I'm saying.
I know, but I mean, that's.
And in Rain Dance, they knew what they were doing
To begin with,
to begin with.
from the start, yeah.
Yes. Mr. Jack and Mr. Theron knew they were developing. They bought it with the timber on it to build a subdivision.
See, I think it's gonna get to the point where these folks that go out and start looking at large tracts of land to do subdivision, whatever, when they have conversations with, the timber folks, they're gonna say, hey, you might leave 30 feet around the side of it, and then you
See,
compensate me for the difference.
because of being up here, I know to ask,
Yes,
are you developing this?
yes.
Then you need to be thinking about an LDA versus if Alan Zipper just calls me and wants me to come cut 40 acres of
Yeah.
timber.
But this ordinance, let's just say that you clear cut 40 acres from me, and then Peter come along and wanted to buy it and develop it. This ordinance would then require that a certain amount of trees be put back in that buffer.
It does. It does now.
Yeah, you
It
have to
does now.
rebuild a buffer, which I'm okay with.
Yep.
Yeah, one way or the other. There are some ordinances that say you clear cut under timber harvesting, you don't get to submit a site development plan for 12 months,
Yeah.
24 months, whatever
That's,
the case may be.
yeah, there's some out there.
That is very
As a
common
deterrent.
ordinance, because it does prevent a site from getting clear cut with the obvious intention of getting around the tree ordinance. Because otherwise,
I
your
got
tree
you.
ordinance isn't gonna have much teeth if somebody's got the foresight to say, ooh, well, I'm timber harvesting, and then 6 months later, I'm site developing.
I got you, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't understand what the 12 months was, but
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
Should it be a longer than 12 months? Should it be 24 as a deterrent?
I'd be happy to start with 12. At least we got some teeth in there, but, I mean, you're right, 12 months isn't a whole lot of time, but, it's at least enough to, if somebody's trying to time a market, it might make them second guess.
Well, then you have a
everything.
bunch of exposed property for soil erosion. I can think of all sorts of things that might happen to it.
Hmm.
Look at that out there on 21.
Oh, yeah, McCollin 21.
Yeah.
Is that what you're?
Yeah.
But Chelsea, where this ordinance though, it is talking about like, there's different pieces to it, right? Like, so.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to find one in particular, and I think it's because the formatting might have been lost a little bit, but, hold on a minute. Where is it? Oh, okay. So
Go, girl.
That's your phone?
as a Georgia fan, I can't tell you how bad I hated hearing that song.
Remix.
Amen.
So, like I see, and I guess I have to count the pages, but it's back talking about forest regeneration area establishment standards. Is that applied to a forestry application, or is that applied to a site development? Like, that's the part I couldn't follow, like, if it's this, then it's this, if it's this, then it's this kind of thing.
So, I think the way I understood it was, to me that was if the site was completely clear cut. So to me that was for, site plans, but maybe I misunderstood that. So, we can definitely take a deeper look into
How
that. for
far
sure.
are you past Effingham County trees?
I'm way into it.
Way past
Yeah,
that?
I'm sorry.
Protected trees,
Yeah.
tree management plan, technical standards.
I went deep into where it's starting to talk about how much you got to do and what.
Site
what
selection
you gotta
standard, is
do.
that what you said?
Forest.
What did you say?
There was the word forest was in there.
Forest?
Yeah, it was. Sorry, now that I'm flip past it again.
I didn't see a big bullet for that.
No, well, there's not. I mean, I think that's what I was saying. I think there's a little bit of the organization of the ordinance that's been lost from the application.
Cutting and pasting,
That would be
yeah.
helpful to see how, like, okay, this is related to this, and because right now it kind of all blends together to me, and it's hard
Okay.
to understand where one section stops and starts. Oh, yeah, I was
Okay, here we go.
technical standards. Yeah, I was into the technical standards.
It's under technical standards.
And there's a item F, forestry regeneration area establishment standards.
Yeah, so the way that I understood that was, if a site was clear cut and you were completely, you were putting back trees, again, reforesting, if that's,
Reforesting for what purpose?
So, and let me get my grasp here. Okay, technical. So if you, and again, this is how, for how I interpreted this, if you clear cut a site and you were within our community tree management area, and and again, I think that needs to also be explained a bit more, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. You had to put back, not just, it wasn't just one or two trees, we're talking about, you know, an extensive amount. To me, that is what that was speaking of. Because we're talking about a large square footage here, not just a buffer area. So if you had a substantial piece of property that you clear cut, to me, that's what this was for.
But are we talking about clear cut it for the development? We would plant these trees, or just I clear cut my property and you're gonna tell me how to replant it back?
You know, I think that would be, need to be more defined. I think that's something that needs to be more defined.
But you're not gonna clear cut hardwood, you're gonna clear cut pine, right?
Well,
do
some
both.
people
You do
clear
both?
cut hardwood
Do
too.
both. You just can't cut your streams.
Yeah, there's what, 50 feet?
I mean, you could timber a
Yes.
wetland as long as you don't,
Yeah. You just
Well,
can't
don't
cut,
disturb it.
you can't
Management
disturb
practices?
running water,
Yeah.
moving, or anything, or dry beds that move water.
Well, but what I don't wanna get
But outside that, you can't
into the
anything else.
business of forestry management companies that's managing large acreages of land, telling them how and what they got to replant back.
Yeah, that ain't our
I
job.
think if we stick strictly to developable areas or county-owned areas, then I think I'm good with that. But I don't wanna see us tell Dave Burns's family they got to plant 1,000 acres back. You gotta put this many hardwoods and
Right.
this
Oh,
many this and this
no.
many that on it.
No, we don't wanna do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beyond our scope.
but I do think the intent of, that's why I was asking this question. I do think the intent of this ordinance, the way it was written, was to encourage the recreation of a natural forest, right? And I'm trying to figure out how or where that might apply in Effingham, right? Because that is a massive standard number of trees. 245 trees per acre is huge. Yeah, it's a really big number. So that's when
Yep.
that's the first thing. Like when I started going through, I started just looking for numbers to try to bounce things off. Okay, and that's where I just kind of, I think that was the last page I took notes on, because yeah, that made me realize I'm not understanding something about the flow of this, because
So that makes a lot more sense. I mean, think about Athens, Clark County. I mean, you're in the hills,
Right.
hardwoods, so probably 200. I mean, I don't even know if they would have 200 mature trees on an acre. Around here, a mature acre wouldn't have about 75 to 100 trees per acre, mature trees. Now, when we reforest, I mean, we put between 600 and 700 trees.
Yeah, but that
per
doesn't mean they all
acre
survive.
with
or
the
take
seedlings.
that. Yeah.
That's correct. So
yeah, but I mean, this is talking about 15% has to be 1.5 inch
Yeah,
caliber
I saw
hardwoods,
that.
30%. So I mean, it's trying to create a diverse replant a forest, like you're saying. Like this is like, to me, they've identified, and you said something that needs to be elaborated. What Effingham County's tree, what was the term? Or tree?
Community area,
Yeah, like what?
or community tree management area.
You know, is that the entire county, or how are we going to define that?
Well, and I think, again, that also needs to be more defined. Do we want it to be, you know, do we want it to be the whole county? Do we want it to be specific areas?
Yeah,
You know, I think,
119 and south. Instituted.
So I'll just say, I mean, and what I was thinking we were going, you know, so landmark trees, absolutely. Effingham County trees, of course. Protected trees. Then when we get into the tree management plan, I mean, I kind of thought at that point we were going to be looking at each individual zoning and what we wanted the tree preservation or to be made up
I
of.
like that.
so, and it can absolutely be that specific.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
And each one, and you know, we were going to talk about roadside buffers and how we wanted those to look with trees.
Yeah.
But not getting into too much of this very detailed, you know, just soil shall have a pH between 5 and 7. I don't even know what
Yeah, that's
that
going
means.
to be impossible.
I can't get that at home.
So
Would it help if I put together, how quickly does the board expect
Nope.
to adopt something like
This is slow and easy wins the race on this one.
So I've fairly recently, because there's a neighboring county that adopted in their new UDO a pretty strong tree ordinance, and I've spent the better part of 2 years trying to figure out how to work with them on that. And I'll go back to the example. That's one thing that never happened there. They never tested it, and then the development community came along and were like, what
Right.
is this, right?
Yeah.
So I do think a test scenario of just like, I've got 100 acres, what does that mean survey-wise? Keep in mind, a detailed tree survey for 150 acres, if you gotta go locate every 12-inch tree, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just to do a survey.
Yeah,
So
any-
I guess
any-
very important to be very specific about what we expect for the size of trees that would have to be surveyed and picked up, and then what our standards are. So what I was gonna say is I could do a fairly quick little Excel spreadsheet. I'm not getting into the details of an ordinance, but just like this, Savannah, Chatham does this, Bryan does this, Hilton Head does this,
Yep.
just to try to give a feel for what the differences are.
Sure,
right?
I think that's a great idea. Yep.
Some are very much, we've got a goal of 50% canopy, whether that's preservation, we encourage preservation, give you more credit for preservation, but
Yes.
we'll let you accommodate it.
Yes, density,
Versus Hilton
something,
Head's much
yep.
more, there's certain things you're not gonna do, but there's a mechanism to do other things.
Yep.
Somewhere in between those two, I think we could probably, or those three, I guess it was, or whatever the number was, but I'm happy to do that. I think it's very hard to do ordinance, like side-by-side comparisons or ordinances. And I can also give an idea of, what per acre a plant back standard of that type might be from a standpoint of what our community might stand to see. So
Okay.
would that be
Yep.
helpful? That's just a tree ordinance standpoint. I still think the buffer ordinances, they need to tie together, but it's a completely separate and different
I
ordinance.
think you
January.
have to go through every buffer and make sure that it fits the ordinance. If not, then you gotta go through the motions of changing it.
So I will say all of these, where I think Dave's idea about different zonings might have different standards is a good idea. None of them do that because they're afraid of the home builder saying, no, I've got to do something different than the industrial guys or vice versa, right? So the tree canopy standard, if the ordinance says our goal was 40% canopy coverage, no matter if you're a grocery store or a residential home builder or whatever, the standard's still there. Now, they may give an out, again, like a payment in lieu of, where they say, well, there's no reason to go waste a bunch of trees planting back here.
Or cluster or
Right.
density instead.
Cluster something,
Yeah.
but, or give the, as opposed to
Yeah.
wasting trees somewhere else in the site, we'll let you, you still got the cost associated with it, but the county can recoup that to be able to plant trees somewhere else or something else. So I'll go into that, but that's the reason I was asking how quickly this has got to be done.
Good.
'Cause That'll take me till between,
Now and January 9th?
halfway to, between now and January for
Okay.
sure. So.
No, I
gotta
appreciate that
start
very
for
much.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can go look, and since there's nobody here, I can say this. Laurel Grove, the subdivision I'm involved with on Highway 30, was timbered 2005, maybe. And just a lot of it was left to grow up. The next landowner had some cows out there, but we actually went, once we got it laid out, GPS'd a lot of the trees to see what we could actually leave on a lot. Where's the house going? And like Alan said, the backyards aren't real. You don't have a lot of options to leave a lot of trees.
Oh, we need to go,
You
R5,
know,
we need to go ahead and expect there's not tree preservation on those
So
lots.
if it was in a
Very
lot,
on those lots
if
to do that.
maybe a back corner on a lot line or something, and it was a particular tree size, then we tried to preserve them, but it's difficult.
So Longleaf Village, they kept that really huge live oak right in the middle, did their stormwater to that. So now you've got that live oak in the middle, and you've got the stormwater pond too. And then they put sidewalks all the way around it. So they've really made that out to be a pretty nice common area for the neighborhood to be able to use.
And we had some live oaks that we left in it. It just happened to work out in our green space.
That's right, yeah. And that's fine. Yeah, that's as long as there's the attempt there, I think that's what we want to do.
So with this change though, like you're not gonna have that tree survey at sketch
That's
plan
fine.
level. No, I'm saying
You-
sketch plan level, so I know that's something else we're gonna talk about later.
Yeah.
A revision that happens to happen because of a tree shouldn't trigger somebody to have to go back to sketch plan, unless we're gonna say we expect them to have a tree survey by the time they come to set sketch plan.
I think that if their sketch plans, you know, show, consideration for the canopy, you know, there has to be some type of give and take there. Because
maybe-
even,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
that's okay, even when they get out there, they're not always gonna know what it is that they can do or can't do. The lay of the land is gonna, some of that. And that's why we wanna be out there when they do it, so we know what we can mark or what we can't mark at the same time.
So what's the tree survey? I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna say, maybe, you know, when we think in terms of like our wetlands delineation, and we do, sketch plan approval, you know, there are projects that come in that don't always have their JD right at sketch plan, you know, and we expect that at site plan you know, for those permits. So it could be similar to that.
Yeah, I just think you have to give it some teeth that somehow, if they haven't gone to that step, that just because a sketch plan's been approved that shows that layout, it may not be viable or feasible, or they may have to tweak it to meet the tree ordinance, because one way or the other, you're not gonna know unless they've gone through that process to know that whole.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's,
What's a tree survey?
Was it a tree survey? They could vary. A lot of places have a standard of if it's a historical, you can use aerial and prove that it's a historically planted pine scenario. They would absolutely not require a full-blown tree survey to locate all the trees on the site, or all the trees, but certain size. So that would be typically like going out and doing a sample, but the ordinance has got to define this somehow, right? So they would go take a representative sample of an acre, and you would apply that and just assume that representative sample kind of applies across the board, right?
it's like polling.
That's only good for a situation where it's a very uniform planting. If you really care about finding the large trees, and you know it's a hardwood site, you've got to go field locate individual trees, and without surveying, you don't know they're there.
So
Drum.
if we just agreed it's hard to leave trees in an R5, why are you gonna do a tree survey?
Well, because I'm assuming this ordinance is gonna have enough teeth that there may be a penalty that they could, either a mitigation requirement strong enough that they might reconsider the layout around a tree, right? Not saying you've got to, or maybe we do say
So
you've
is your
got to,
tr- is
over
your-
a certain size.
Is your tree survey for us 12 inches and up, 20 inches and up?
I don't know,
what-
that's where I
I
was
mean,
asking.
or is a tree survey
It's usually a list of.
every bush and
No,
tree?
no. It's
Okay.
usually a list of here's the species we care about,
Okay, I
right? So
got
what, we don't care about water oaks, we don't
Yep.
care about sweet gums. Here's the list of what we expect you to survey.
And the
it's
size.
usually 18-ish, right, is a pretty fair number.
Yeah.
With the exception of maybe you say, if we want to give the buffer ordinance more teeth, with the exception of in a buffer area, we expect to see everything down to 12 or 6 or whatever the number is, right? That's very common practice. But on a very heavily hardwood site, 18 is still going to be a lot of trees to survey. But it is what it is. I mean, it's a.
Okay, yeah, I got you now.
So what I would like to do with this is taking your feedback, and working with, the feedback that Ryan's gonna give. You know, in the next couple months, we can determine, you know, work on it and then bring it back to you, and maybe at that time, you know, we can decide if we just wanna do discussion or if we wanna move it forward. That way we have something, you know, more substantial, but I do appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm always coming off as I'm shooting holes in things, and I would just close by saying I am so proud that the county is considering this, and thank you for the effort you put into it, because I do feel like we desperately do need it, right? I mean, it's what we hear from a lot of the people that they're concerned with, right? And I think with just a little bit, it doesn't have to be a lot. It can show a lot. But I'm all about what do people see when they ride down the road, right?
Yeah, I mean,
If
that
they
is.
don't
that
drive
is
into the neighborhood, they
character.
don't care, right? But if it's
That's
what,
right.
when they drive down Blue Jay, when they drive down 21, and when they drive down whatever, that's what they mostly care about.
Well, the reason I mentioned that one at Blanford is so ugly. When you cut off there and you don't see nothing but a backyard and a picnic table and a chair or whatever, trash cans. Where, I mean, there's no protection there whatsoever.
Now, they've got at the time, their replacement trees are in the ground, but you don't even notice them.
So,
Yeah, they're
Because
so
the houses
small.
are so big that they dwarf
just to
it.
give you an idea, like, so the big PUDs that were approved in Bluffton back in the early 2000s, they'd already gotten savvy enough of what they really cared about, and they had massive buffers, like buffers that are rivaling our industrial buffers to some of their protected roadways. But they actually have a bigger residential buffer standard than they do a commercial buffer standard, double the size, because of the impact that the backyards of a neighborhood have to major roadways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big deal. But again, their difference there is you preserve 100 feet of planted pine, there's still enough buffer there that it does something. If you preserve 100 feet of farmland, it's just 100 feet of farmland until you get to the back of that house, right? That's the challenge we've got. So much of Effingham is in agricultural, pasture land or row crops versus,
I think that's where you do a berm. You do a lonesome oak. Out there on Courthouse.
certainly an option, yeah,
I like lonesome oak. Miss HB Run did that. It's awesome.
yeah.
Okay, commercial corridors next.
Sounds good to me.
So, moving on, Zach, we don't need any action.
No.
No action. Item 2, consideration of an amendment to the Code of Ordinances, Part 2, Official Code, Chapter 54, Section 54.3, Commercial Corridor.
Yes, sir. So there's actually been some changes from the ordinance that was originally sent to you. There is, I believe, the only major changes will be Section F, Design and Development Standards. Sorry. So-
0272.
What is it?
0272.
No, it'll be a printed copy. Is the one you
Oh.
should have it
Printed.
with you. It might be in your packet for later tonight. Commercial corridor is pretty much a way to regulate development standards for our newly identified commercial corridors in the county. You have Highway 80 from Chatham County to 280, Highway 21 from our Chatham County line to our City of Rankin line, 21 from Rankin to Springfield, and then a portion of Hodgeville Road, and of course our new Effingham Parkway. So this is mostly based off of some studies that the county is looking into having conducted, and those outside agencies will actually be the ones who design the design standards for these. For the Highway 80, we are in contact with Kimberly Horn. And I believe the Highway 21 Rankin to Point Wentworth is going to be a Thomas and Hutton possible corridor study thing.
So what is Hodgeville Road? Is that where the road that's cutting through the industrial park is gonna come out on Hodgeville Road?
Hodgeville Road is, I'm sorry, I actually did not put it in here. It is going to be around our Goshen Road to,
Otis Seconder.
yes sir, sorry, mine went blank. More of that side, and it's specifically going forward. Anything that's there now, as long as it is not having to be replaced more than 50%, will be a non-conforming legal use. Anything that has to be replaced 50 or more has to adhere to our new standards.
So this is gonna be an overlay district on top of the existing zoning,
Correct.
and there are to be determined standards that will be applied to these corridors.
Correct. Once those studies are completed that's when we'll actually have more specific standards. And each corridor will have separate standards.
Is there a reason for that?
Just based off of the area that they're located in. Highway 80, does have a different appearance currently than Highway 21 does, so that will be taken into effect with those design standards.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good answer. I just was curious as to the reasoning. There are certain things that I think we could encourage to be more standard. There's always a chance to start. Sorry, Dave.
Yo, you're good. I guess I'm struggling with why Hodgeville.
That's what I'm.
Why it
struggling
was
with.
thrown in there with our state highways.
Hodgeville was approved as a commercial corridor whenever we adopted the flume.
That's been adopted?
Yes, sir.
What's the flume?
The future land use map.
It was adopted as a policy document.
When was that?
What's that you do?
The October meeting?
Let me double check for you.
No, it's okay, because I just saw that
Denied a development
overlay now
because
showing up on
road's falling apart.
Exactly. And it's
the
too
Effingham
far.
GIS site, and I was curious about that.
Yes, sir, it was adopted as a policy document.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. We have state highways, and then we have a county road, and then we have all these uses that are not allowed on our state highways
In these commercial corridors.
in these commercial corridors. I guess I'm struggling to understand that.
Well, can I ask a question and maybe it'll help?
Sure.
Is the intent of these guidelines will be to define a bit about what the landscape, the lighting, the signage, the building architecture, I'm assuming there'll be some controls on that. So if there is a corridor, Dave, I think like Hodgeville's got a stretch of commercial, right? If it's got the vision long-term that even if it doesn't have it now, it's been identified on the future land use map to be able to allow for it with the growth pattern. I could see that the standards related to what we want it to look like would be dramatically different than what we want it to look like on 21.
And you know what
So-
they include?
What?
Setbacks in case you do.
So I'm good with these uses right here
Yeah.
on Hodgeville.
Yeah. But 21?
But where are we gonna put? I mean, we're not gonna allow shops. We're not gonna allow transmission shops or tire shops or paint shops, clinics.
We can
Orange.
absolutely take those out if you would like, and we can.
I mean, I'm not arguing. I'm just
Yeah,
trying.
purely
I'm just
suggestive.
trying to understand.
So there are standards that go along with certain uses that are difficult to aesthetically please.
So what
Those
do we
are
want? Office commercial?
no, well that's true. Yeah, I think that the intent behind a commercial corridor was more of the storage units like next to, or the storage areas next to the academy on 21. Things like that. And then also the increased setback in case we come back at the future. And then, rear loaded lots, things that you might have some other things. And then also to make the commercial corridor more pedestrian friendly.
Where in the world on Hodgeville is there a commercial corridor?
I was just wondering that because you said from Goshen to,
It's from that concrete plant north. What?
well, but one half of that road, one side of that road is industrial all the way down. The other side is residential except for one little 18-acre spot that's commercial that they want to turn into
PD.
PD.
Right.
So I'm not,
Is it from Saddlehorn down towards Blue Jay that they want to make commercial on that side?
Mr. Ernest he's commercial now. His field,
well,
a little bit of it.
yeah, it is.
But that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Those commercial corridors were identified mainly by the county manager in conjunction with the planning department. And so There probably is gonna be more future commercial on Hodgeville, but agreed, it's not gonna be as much as you would see on the Parkway.
Yeah, 'cause I was just thinking that, like I say, that one side of the road is all industrial.
I guess you can do a gas station?
Yes.
Yeah, on the uses, to me, those would be as part of the design and development guidelines, just as customized as those would be. Like, there would be, like, Highway 21 would allow for certain things
Have a
that,
tattoo shop there.
you know, Hodgeville wouldn't, use-wise. And each one of those would have to have a specific standard in the uses, if we're trying to disallow certain uses in an overlay district. How far back from the right-of-ways is it? Like, is it just the parcels that touch it? Is it 500 feet back? Is
It is what has frontage on those commercial corridors.
And how far back?
Has to have frontage.
It needs to go beyond that, I think.
Add it
I mean,
further.
most overlays would have a standard of like, it's a certain depth, like, right, so.
60 feet probably would be
Well,
something.
it just,
Yeah.
it depends, like, what the standard is. Again, I think it would vary based off of the road it is, right? Hodgeville's depth would likely be a lot less than, if you're trying to get into controls and standards, like,
Yeah. Should be proportional to the road right away that exists on it now.
depending on what we're trying
Hodgeville
to do.
goes 4-lane, you're gonna buy people's expensive property, you should set them way back. So you buy in
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
Give me an example of what on Hodgeville Road you would think the setback should be.
60 feet.
Oh, I guess I wasn't thinking about setback. I guess I was thinking if we got a good quality overlay on that, that it would say that, you know, it'd be more about making the scale of the building appropriate for being neighborhood type commercial, right? And it's, feels like it meets inside the neighborhood. It's got different standards that you don't get your base standard Dollar General. You get something that's dressed up and feels more like it fits in the neighborhood, that kind of thing. And then you've got, and maybe it's even size limited, right? That you can't be more than a 25,000 square foot footprint, right? Because we're trying to keep it Hodgeville scale. 21, to me, 21, with the exception of trying to drive some landscape and architectural standards and setbacks, maybe of that standard, uses, I mean, that is our commercial corridor, so we gotta allow most of the uses that we allow commercially in 21's corridor.
Right.
21 and 80.
Brian, so are you saying maybe even the size of the structure itself be regulated to a degree? Is that how I understood that?
I would definitely think that would be something that would be considered. Cause to me, Hodgeville, that corridor in particular would be one that the scale of the commercial use could be really important to be in, whether or not it's appropriate on Hodgeville or not.
But getting back to the setbacks, we gotta think about if we widen the road, we want those setbacks in our favor, so we're not buying.
Yeah, but so if the road right of way is already, say, it's at least 60 in the county, right? So a setback of 25 and 25, that's another 50, that's 110, and 110, you could put a lot.
Yeah.
To me, requiring an excessive setback just for if we want to come in the future, that's not fair, right? That's just saying you can't use your property in case I want to use it in the future.
Right.
But not allowing going to zero, I mean, that's fair too, right? So, I mean, again, 25 on both sides, that's 50 plus, again, 60.
Well, how wide is the lane? How wide is the lane for a car to go down?
Usually
12
it's
feet,
12
15
feet.
feet?
12
Yeah.
feet.
Most standard, like, neighborhood streets in the county, the standard right-of-way was 60 feet wide.
Yeah.
But that's like to the out, you know, that's way outside the travel lanes, right? It's 18 feet on both sides of that road. But Blue Jay, Hodgeville, that's probably gonna need to be 100.
Well, they just sent
But
me.
I think it already is,
The
'cause
reason
I
I
think
asked
it's already
that, they just sent me a request to give them some land. They want 20 feet for possible future road expansion, and 15 feet for possible utilities. And so, then it would be set back on, if we pass that ordinance, so I give them that 35 feet, and then I got another setback, not including that 35 feet. And they
Yeah,
wanna
I think
pay
that's what-
$10, they wanna pay $10 for it, and I paid $80,000 for it, about 2 months ago.
But,
Do
I
they
mean,
really,
that to
they
me is
really
where,
wanna pay $10?
Really?
What?
Yeah, the contract says $10 and other various considerations. Well, I don't really wanna even charge them for it, but
$10 a foot, $10 an acre, $10 for the whole parcel.
$10 for what they need.
$10 for what they need,
Wow.
the whole strip.
again, that's, if that's the case, if that's been planned, right, then it can't be an additional, the setback should be based off of, in my opinion, like, what is the aesthetic we're trying to create? And then it gives us a little bit of future buffer. It should not be, we're basically putting an easement across the front of everybody's property for the chance we might wanna widen the road at some point in the future, cause that'd be.
Yeah, I think you
taken
give up
without-
your 35 feet, and then you may have a roadside buffer along with your development.
Right,
On top of my 35 feet.
yeah, because you won't be able to keep the buffer in that, maybe short term.
That might change things for me. I'm just being honest.
No, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
But your acquisition could say, I'm not doing it, get it in writing.
Well, I bought the land because I needed it. And I don't mind basically giving them 35 foot along the road, but
You shouldn't have to give any, they should buy the right of way.
At the value of
Yeah,
At the
at fair market value.
that ain't how it's proposed.
Well, I mean, I'm used,
Without
yeah.
counter.
Okay, that's not how it's proposed. So, but even with that being said, I'm thinking about what my use for the property will be later
That's right.
if we keep sucking land away from it.
No, I
You
get
know,
it. Yeah, I mean,
Maybe I ought to sell them the whole piece and move. I know, we don't need to go there right now, but go ahead and move on.
So, just to clarify, because this is an item that we'll be voting on later tonight. Section I, the use is not allowed in commercial corridor. Maybe we regroup on those, make something towards the Hodgeville side that's not necessarily for the 21 and bigger roads. Is that what you were thinking, Dave?
yes, and I mean, most of these, a lot of these are businesses that I would prefer not to see in our commercial corridor, but I don't know that that's, since it's a commercial business, I don't know that that's fair to the property owner. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
if
Does
they're
that make
going to
sense?
commercial, where do they go, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you were saying you can't put it on the road, but you can put it right behind the road.
Yeah.
I mean, right behind the lot, just on the road.
Yeah,
We just don't want to see it from the road.
right. And so instead of hiding it, just don't see it.
So, yeah, I don't, I mean, I don't know if that's fair.
I think it needs to go beyond the parcels that it fronts onto.
Say that again?
It needs to go beyond the parcel, just the parcel that fronts on the road. If we're talking about a corridor, right?
Yeah.
If I got a 50-foot deep parcel, then that'd be a way for me to avoid it. All right, I'll go plat a parcel that's 50 feet wide, then the rest of my development doesn't have to meet it. Most overlays I've seen say it's 150 feet deep off the road.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
as
it
a
might
crow
capture
flies.
3 parcels, or it might capture, or you might have a parcel that's 5,000 feet deep and it's only the first 150 feet it applies to, right? So, I think I've gotten confused which version is the current version, but
Yeah, that's probably worth something looking at.
yeah, there we go.
What is an itinerant
I
merchant?
was gonna ask that too.
You're way smarter than me. You don't know.
I don't know what, I know what itinerant, I know
I
what
mean,
itinerary
briefly.
is, but I don't
Fair?
understand.
Food truck.
Food truck,
Food truck.
itinerant.
Can't have food truck on the road.
They come and they go.
Pete's Pretzels.
So you said this is going to be, like, we're trying to push this forward tonight?
Eh,
Well, I guess if we do, and we strike all those uses, what are we approving? Other than defining that there's
Everything
five.
else.
Well, I know, but that's really just, everything else is just the boundaries of these districts, right? And the scope of what these future studies will be doing, that's what it's doing?
Yes, sir. It's very generic information.
So,
yeah, once we get the scope of the studies, you're probably gonna come back and really see the meat and potatoes. That makes sense?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we got to.
Nothing here is
right.
desirable in all of these things. I mean,
but, I mean, so
but you could put a Lowe's there.
So you have a strip center, right? I mean, with 5 units in it.
One wants to be a pawn shop.
I mean,
and
you have a fortune teller.
one wants to be a smoke shop, and
Yeah, I mean, you got a pawn shop, I mean, a massage parlor. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand why. I think when somebody wants to come up here and do one of these, there's gonna be a, why can't I? Why can't I put that on Highway 21? I'm just asking.
It's a good question.
well, there is a bunch. If we're talking about Highway 21, there's a bunch of car washes on 21, isn't there?
Yeah.
Vehicular-oriented uses are gonna be on Highway 21.
Yeah, and
Otherwise,
there
they
are,
won't, they won't function. Their customer base won't be there, so, right?
There are truck terminals on 21 now. They're selling trucks.
But to me, it needs, what I thought I was understanding is that there would be additional standards placed on these type of use. I know that's not what it says right now, but say a car wash, right? That it can't look like this Bahama Breeze, right? It's gotta be architecture that
Right.
makes sense for Effingham, that kind of thing versus, no, you can't do it, right? That to me is what the overlay
Right.
corridor would say, is like, we want it to be, you can do a car wash, it's gotta do this. Maybe the car wash can't face directly out to Highway 21, it's gotta turn to the side or something like that. Just, that's what I was thinking, as opposed to a list of you can't do it, because, and maybe there is, once those specifics of those districts come out, that there's a very specific list for each of those. But just a list that would apply to any or all of them right now, I wouldn't feel comfortable with
Then
that.
we will, get some of those standards that you're discussing and bring them back to you next month. We won't concentrate on the uses, we'll concentrate on the standards. And then see what you think. And if it just happens to be that within those standards, some of the uses are, negated, then we'll deal with it then.
Okay, so you're gonna remove that from the agenda?
You'll just table it until January.
Like used in new automotive sales, if that can't happen on 21, it's not happening, right? But I agree, it should probably be, when we write the standards for Hodgeville, they probably shouldn't be allowed on Hodgeville,
Yeah.
Right.
No,
right? That's where I think it's, take it here, but
Yeah.
not here. That kind of
I
thing.
agree with this, with the Hodgeville aspect,
Right.
not being able to do these things.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with the state highways.
I thought we were talking about Hodgeville at first, and then I realized, wait a second, you're talking about 2180 and all these other little.
We're not doing anything with 17? Highway 17?
You know, I traveled on 17 last night from the roundabout on 119 down to headed, I guess what is that, north? That was a friggin' scary road.
But it's a state highway.
It's terrible.
Well, don't drive it at midnight, Peter.
Well, it was right at dusk, and then it turned dark, and it was a nightmare.
That's 5 o'clock traffic for that road, 5:30.
Yeah, I mean, it's a racetrack.
Logs trucks are still on it, semis are still on it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people.
The intersection of 17 and Blue Jay is already a
I mean,
commercial.
they're passing and they're just
Oh, it
coming
needs some
in.
design
when
standards.
you're
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
at 'em.
right now. Correct.
You go, what the heck? They almost head on collisions.
Yeah, well, 17 is straight as an arrow for however long it is for that stretch too. So it is very, very dangerous. I agree with you. And all the middle school and high school traffic flows out into it too if you're heading that direction. So it's a challenging spot.
So with these uses, would y'all consider them okay for the parkway? Because we are also having to take that into effect as well.
Some, I mean, I don't. I think, in my opinion, to be able to look at the uses, I would need to see the future land use map that's been approved and see how that goes and what, like, and I'm assuming there's some discussion in that about the character areas about, does it get into the types of commercial or is it just encouraged to be commercial uses?
So your districts, Article 4 of the zoning ordinance, probably the last most crucial piece has got to take those character areas off of the future land use map and tie them into the zoning districts that we have created. And that's going to be the worst and the best thing that we do. Because it's going to be, that's 3 or 4 meetings. Because that's what it's going to take to bring all those together. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. But you've got to take that future land use map, and there's what, 6 character areas, you know, the agricultural, residential, you know, the commercial, the transitional, the industrial. You're going to have to describe those both in relation to your zoning ordinance, R1, R2, R3, R4, and then you're going to have to do it for the map as well. And so that's how all that's going to bring it all together. So when you talk about those definitions and things like that, that's where it's all going to take place. So you're probably going to have a page or 2 of certain characteristics of those.
So a future staff report for a zoning consideration is going to say you're in future land use map character area XYZ, and here's the allowed zonings that are should be considered inside that area.
And comp plan might say this.
Yeah.
And those are your 3 documents. Yep.
And there will be exits off the parkway?
Wow, see, I always look at it like if it's on a
Are
state.
there exits off the parkway? I think it's, I see it as like
A limited access highway.
yeah.
I have not. I think there are going to be some. I don't know how many they're going to be.
Sammy, I don't know if this answers your question. And this, I know you can discriminate against businesses. If, you know, we went to Pooler. I ain't been to Pooler. I don't go to Pooler. But I had to take my daughter down there.
Look at the Publix next time. Yeah.
And so I have not been over there where they built the new Costco and all. But over there's a lot of strip, you know, whatever, I call them strip malls. I mean, those long buildings cut up, you know, and the only way you know what's in there is because it has a sign on it, right? So I think the concern that, and like I said, I don't mean to be ugly, but a fortune teller who pops up a little fortune teller stand out on his commercial property on Highway 21 looks much different that way versus in a strip mall. So, you know, controlling how the design of these buildings look, I think is more important than actually what's in them.
Okay.
To me.
Yeah.
I agree.
Does that
that's
make
good.
sense?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
I agree 100%, and that's where I don't know where those standards that are coming from next, but that is going to be very architectural language based. That, I mean, it's going to take a bit of understanding of what does that actually mean, right? Like,
What does it look like?
What does it look like
Yeah.
exactly?
Give me examples.
They're sharp.
Yeah.
Of course, they're new, but they're sharp. They got landscaping, planting, and everything else in them, and then they just have a sign on them. So I think that's more important than trying to regulate, figure out, you know, how to keep the tattoo parlor out.
Yeah, when the developer buys that property and develops it and becomes a landlord, he wants tenancy. He wants people paying him rent. He don't care. He don't discriminate. Oh, you're a tattoo, get out.
But I think, you know, and we all see it, and it's been there as long as I can remember, but the little round building down there,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, not architecturally appeasing, you know, at this time, the one right there before rink and the little round,
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah.
been there
yeah.
forever.
Where is that?
you
It
know.
was gonna be a restaurant.
Is that what-
I
Like
think
a
I
ice
think it was a
cream
sewing
place.
place. I think somebody
At
sewed
one
in
time,
there.
and it never did, y'all.
Oh, that's one of the standards we were gonna have was no angles.
No angles, okay.
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's not even right. Not even right angles.
But, you know, that's what I think.
Hey, that would make us unique. It'd be like heaven. It'd be like that.
Yeah.
The community of circles.
That's right.
There you go.
Ovals would qualify too. Ellipses.
Yep. Parabolas.
Make circles and ovals.
That's
Oh yeah. Hey, you'd be right. You'd have the molds for them.
I got them all for 'em, yeah, I can do it. I think we ought to put that in.
Yeah, I know, right? That's right.
I just, that is gonna take I mean,
It is.
it's gonna take a lot.
I
right?
know.
mean,
I know, but it's important.
and I think what Dave just said is, we can do all we want to with setbacks, landscape, lighting, but if there's no controls on the architectural, we don't need to make it crazy, over expensive,
No.
but there's some things that can be
Just
done that make the
clear,
building
simple,
dramatically
clear,
better.
On our roadside, on our corridors, yes.
Yeah.
If you wanna pop up the TP, then you got to get behind it.
Right.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Chelsea.
Yes.
So the other room is waiting if you would like.
Okay, discussion. We do need to adjourn.
And subdivisions is on for tonight too,
Subdivisions was approved by the commissioners at the last meeting.
so it's already approved.
Yeah, even with your comments were taken into consideration by your District 1 representative. It's way better than it was.
Well, that was the use list last time.
We did two things. We did subdivision and table of permitted uses.
Okay, so the subdivision ordinance that was sent out to us 2 weeks ago, what shows as red has now been adopted?
Several weeks ago,
Okay,
yes.
okay. I could have dug into this tree ordinance a lot more if I wouldn't have dug back into the subdivision ordinance.
You can still dig into subdivision ordinance because I want you to find something that's not right. Now, we've already found one thing. I've got definitions of a family subdivision and a major subdivision. I gotta come back because I somehow left out minor subdivision. So that's the 5 to 10, so. It's mentioned, but it's not clear.
I didn't have a whole lot, but I did have a few things that would be worth, again, if it
Send them
comes
to
back
me.
up. yeah.
Send them to me. Seriously, send them to me.
He's got them.
So just,
Oh, yeah, I'll take them like that, yeah.
I'll scan them, so I got a copy.
Okay.
Don't trust you, buddy.
No, he doesn't. That's okay.
Huh?
Yeah,
Trust you, I'm
That's
just
right.
saying,
That's right.
having copies of what I spent
I'm
time
just
reviewing.
messing with you.
Do it for the joy of it. But, so it is, now, so we all know when we're approving sketch plans, they go no further than us. Right?
no.
Is that not
So,
what this ordinance says?
different, yeah, so sketch plans for subdivisions still go to the commissioners. But we don't have requirements for sketch plans for commercials. Read what it says.
Major subdivision sketch plan approval shall be granted only if the sketch plan complies with all applicable laws governing subdivision land in Effingham, subsequent to the approval or conditional approval by scratch out Board of Commissioners, insert Planning Commission. The Planning Commission staff shall issue notice to proceed to the.
And they do final plat.
Right, I understand they do.
Yeah,
final
they
plan,
still
but-
do final plat, yeah.
But sketch plan.
Yep, sketch plans right here.
Okay. We just need to keep that in mind. Which is
And
good.
commercial.
No,
That's it.
no, subdivision only. Yep,
What?
That's a major subdivision, so that's,
yeah, major subdivision.
Subdivision?
Yeah.
I thought you said commercial.
Commercial doesn't have a requirement for sketch plans.
okay.
So if you guys do not make it a condition of the rezoning approval, it will not be done and you will not see it until we change the ordinance. So just keep that in mind too.
We have to recommend special stipulation that they have
Have,
a sketch plan.
submit
part
a
of the
sketch
zoning
plan
that-
before final, or before construction.
yeah. It'll come back to us
Yep.
for review for.
Now, we have the amendment for that we're gonna have to get to you in January. But we just didn't have it ready for this meeting yet.
Oh,
And
it
that
isn't?
would be for sketch plans for commercial and industrial.
Because there are several communities. I love the fact that we have the option for sketch plan, because some places don't give you that option, and you gotta do full civil plans, and you're guessing that you got what
Right,
everybody wants.
right.
Hollywood.
But there are others that will allow you to optionally do it, right? So if you're real confident that what you've got going, you can, if timing is that critical.
I think the commissioners feel, less, they're trusting in the sketch plan process, so they have a better understanding of what actually is being done. You know, I mean, so in theory, the rezoning could be anything in that district, right? So the sketch plan gives them a better understanding of what actually could occur out of that list of, 40 things that could occur. That's the advantage of the sketch plan, I think, that they feel that way. And for us, it makes it fairly simple for compliance.
All right, I'm gonna adjourn this portion. Workshop adjourned. Hey, Brad. Hey.
Hey, Brad.
Hey.
Nice
Hey,
shirt.
Brad. Get too big for it.
Yeah.
Hey, Brad.
Ah, well, it does happen.
You're starving me to death.
I used to be 165 pounds for 4 years. Okay, we're gonna go in the other room.